Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Mountain Connect. Hope you're enjoying our beautiful Rocky Mountain spring weather. First and foremost, I wanted to thank my staff. I've had the same staff for about 6 years now, and this event wouldn't be what it is without them. And with that, if you get a chance, please thank Kirsty, Lisa, and Dominique, our photographer. Also this year, I asked my friend Doug Adams to take on a heavy lift, which was to pick up some slack for me as I travel quite a bit, and he went above and beyond, and so please thank him. So we're going to go over some, we have a really busy schedule, so we're going to go over some highlights and logistical changes. So Doug?
Okay, we have, most people are here. Everybody got here except for Peggy Schaefer, who maybe learned a lesson, or the state learned a lesson that Frontier Airlines is not the most reliable airline out there. So Sandeep Takhtali who is consulting for a few states, he's going to take Peggy's place in that session this afternoon, moderated by Chris Mitchell. Quick update on the rooms. The BEAD track is upstairs. The case studies and emerging technologies tracks are in the Quandary Peaks 1 and 3. We're going to have signs out in front of each room by the time we break here. Community development 1 and 2 are in Grays Peak 2 and 3, which is right by the Media Center. So that's it for the changes for this year. If you happen to have a smartphone, which everyone here does, the agenda is up to date and updated on the website. So the booklet obviously was printed a week ago. So if you want an absolutely up-to-date agenda, go on the website and check it out there. Okay, so also this year we have a media center where we will be holding, and by we mean our friend Bob Knight and Harrison Edwards. Bob's done a great job and offered to help us this year as the media sponsor. They're a great PR agency out of Connecticut. If you don't know Bob, please introduce yourself to him. We will have several press conferences over there in Grays Peak 1. So if you see a lot of hubbub going on over there, that's what's happening. Anything else?
Yep, well, the other thing that we want to let you know is that we are live streaming our keynotes. So you can see that on YouTube and Twitter. And I told you last year that there were a handful of things that I would keep woven into the fabric of our agenda. And obviously, over the next couple days, we're going to be talking about those topics. And the two that I really want to talk about today before we go to Senator Bennet is our supply chain issues and the lack of qualified fiber technicians and wireless technicians. So you'll find those woven into the agenda. So just wanted to make sure I let you know that, kept that promise from last year. So before we get to Senator Bennet, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with BEAD. Be curious to see, you'll see the question mark there, how long this actually takes until we see the money. And so I hope you enjoy the session with Alan Davidson as well. And I just wanted to say thank you to our sponsors and our exhibitors this year. We had a lot of new sponsors and exhibitors. Thank you.
Highlights from the agenda. So while we wait for Senator Bennet to log on from DC, and again, we really appreciate it. We had a virtual conference in 2020. I don't think that Jeff or I would ever do a virtual conference again.
No.
But we feel like I've got to be in DC to be in session in the Senate is a good excuse to jump on Zoom. So but real quick, while we're waiting for him to connect, I wanted to sort of give you some of my highlights, which mean nothing. I'm just, take a look at the booklet and think about some of these sessions. Today, in the BEAD track, as soon as we're done here, we have back-to-back funding sessions with Lori Adams and Greg Bathrick. They're going to be focusing on funding from different perspectives, including BEAD, ARPA, Reconnect. So we're excited about that. And of course, the state broadband leaders this afternoon. Broadband mapping is tomorrow on in the BEAD track. That should be interesting, and how the mapping will all work. Over in the emerging technologies track, we have some panels about Wi-Fi 6 that is now emerging now that supply chain has gotten a little bit better. And this afternoon, I'm excited to welcome Dan Kibler, who will give us a nice rundown of opportunities that 5G presents us. That's at 3 today. And then followed by that, Facebook or Meta, whatever we want to call it today, David Botha will explain Telegraph multi-gigabit solution. Tomorrow we have an interesting panel focused on smart grid efforts for Colorado Springs that Jeff Ryman is moderating. Over in the community development track, after this, Emily Johnson from the Colorado Health Institute, I think she's here, I'd love to introduce myself, will fill us in to see post-pandemic what's going on with telehealth and whether people are adopting it, using it, like it, and what we should expect from telehealth moving forward. Another interesting panel is headed up by Duke Horan. He's going to be talking about the actual construction process and what we should consider with the actual personnel and how we keep staffed and how everything is moving with that. So I would encourage you to look at that. And stories about Hoover. And then, of course, we have Joshua Edmonds with Bruce Patterson talking about how Detroit is overcoming their digital divide. So that's exciting as well. You might have to, if you're here with multiple people from the organization, you might have to divide and conquer. This whole agenda, we take a lot of pride in trying to do brand new agenda every year. So over in the case studies, this is personal to me, that my client Ernie Statton from Fairlawn, Ohio, and Fort Collins, who I did a little work with, they're going to talk about the differences in how they launched, the transparency, and how it impacts today. Tomorrow, we have a couple Colorado Springs panels, as we mentioned, over talking about fiber builds that already are underway. Colorado Springs seems to be a popular spot. Do we have the senator yet, or should I vamp? Or?
He's not quite logged in yet.
Okay.
So does anybody have a good joke?
I don't have a good joke. So I'll give you, while I'm giving highlights, today at lunchtime, Lori, related to me by marriage, we'll have an awesome general session keynote panel about the fires in Boulder County. We live in one of the two communities that were affected. 1,000 homes were lost in 12 hours, maybe 10, was it 12? I don't know, 10 to 12 hours, and how we might have fallen down as an industry, as a broadband industry, and how we might move forward in the future to do a better job, to be actually considered and act like utility, that we all want to say that broadband is a utility. So I think he's trying to log on in.
Sorry, trying to get the senator on Zoom.
This is why we don't like virtual conferences.
Right, hate them. Hate them, have no control over this, so. If you could just be patient for 1 minute. I know he's joining from Washington, D.C., so we'll get back to you in 1 minute, so. Now, what's that?
Oh yeah. I bought this. I haven't read it yet.
Let me know when he's on the screen.
500 restaurant. I think just globally in terms of where things are pretty big.
Why? Okay, I need to get my phone.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, it's Michael Bennet.
Hi, Senator Bennet. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. We're very, sorry, let me take a seat here. Very grateful to have you address our audience and take time to spend with us this week or this morning. I wanted to let people know, if they're not aware, about the Bridge Act, and perhaps I know you're going to talk about the Bridge Act, as it was the precursor to BEAD.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that, too.
So I wanted to start out with a question. If you go back and look at the Bridge Act, do you feel that what's in BEAD now is very similar to what you guys came up with in the Bridge Act?
I'm not sure who I'm talking to, and I'm wondering if the audience is there. I just can't see anything, so.
They are here, they're all listening. You're talking to Jeff Gavlinski. I'm the CEO of Mountain Connect.
Hi, Jeff. Well, the question was about the Bridge Act?
Yeah, well, what I would like to know is if, now that we have BEAD, do you feel that the original intent of the Bridge Act is visible and in BEAD?
I do. I absolutely do, and I want to thank all of you for your leadership. For over 2 very difficult years during COVID to keep our state connected. And I don't think it should have ever taken a pandemic to put broadband at the top of Washington's agenda. We've been at the top of Colorado's agenda for years, and mine as well, because wherever I went in the state, whether it was rural or suburban or urban, broadband kept coming up again and again. People constantly told me that their broadband was either too slow or too expensive to be much use to their family, their farm or their small business. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit, we all heard the stories of families struggling to go to work and school at the same time on a slow network, small businesses that couldn't transition to telework because their connections couldn't support it, kids going to school in Walmart parking lots. I mean, as the former superintendent of the Denver Public Schools, I've said over and again that asking a student to learn without internet access is no different than asking them, especially in the 21st century, to learn without textbooks. And all of this, I think, created a bipartisan consensus in Washington that we could no longer accept the status quo, and that we finally had to bridge America's digital divide and make an investment so that the country could compete. And that's why a few months into the pandemic, I introduced the bill that you mentioned, the Bridge Act. It's a piece of legislation I wrote based on my conversations across the state with organizations like the Delta Montrose Electric Association and the Northwest Colorado Council of Governments. And our goal was to write the most ambitious broadband policy possible that could still attract bipartisan support and address the challenges in Colorado. And the bill essentially did 2 things, which are absolutely the framing of the BEAD Act as well. First, it put states in the driver's seat, not Washington, on the theory that our communities have the best understanding of the needs on the ground and the greatest incentive to spend funds effectively. And second, we significantly raised standards for new broadband. We quadrupled the minimum download speed from 25 megabits per second to 100. And we also said that states have to prioritize even faster gigabit networks that meet our needs in the 21st century and prevent us from having to rebuild these networks in 5 or 10 years. And on that point, I hardly need to remind any of you that Washington has frittered away billions of dollars, some estimates $50 billion over the years to subsidize networks that haven't provided the capabilities our farmers need for precision agriculture, that our students and small businesses need to connect online. It's wasted a lot of money and it's left a lot of communities behind, especially mountain communities. And our bill put an end to that by insisting on the highest broadband standards across America. We put the bill out 2 years ago, and last summer we reintroduced it with Senator Rob Portman, my Republican colleague from Ohio, and Senator Angus King, an independent from Maine. So the bill wasn't just bipartisan, it actually was tripartisan. And when the bipartisan infrastructure law came together, the three of us worked very hard to add our bill to the final package. And now the $42.5 billion of broadband funding going to states through the BEAD program comes almost entirely from a bill I wrote on the western slope of Colorado with so many of you. And if you step back, it means that Colorado has helped shape the single largest broadband investment in American history. And I think that, that ought to make us proud as a state, but it also raises expectations for our leadership, Colorado's leadership, in the days ahead, because in some ways, passing the law was the easy part. Now the hard work falls on everyone in that room to actually go out and do the work and seize this historic opportunity for Colorado and for the country. This is a once-in-a-generation investment in our future. High-speed broadband is as important to America's competitiveness today as rural electrification was in the 1930s, or the interstate highway system was in the 1950s. It would be inconceivable to imagine our country today if our parents and grandparents hadn't made those investments. And if we rise to this moment, and I don't think there's any reason we shouldn't, our kids and grandkids are going to look back 30 years from now or 60 years from now and say the same thing about our decision to ensure that every American, no matter where they live, have access to affordable high-speed broadband. So I'm very grateful for everybody's leadership up to this point, and I'm extremely grateful for I know the leadership that's going to make the most of this opportunity, put Colorado in the driver's seat and lead all 50 states in the implementation of this bill. And I'm grateful that you gave me a moment to speak, and I'll stop there and hand it back over to you, Jeff. Thank you for
Thank you, Senator Bennet. Really appreciate it. Thank you. I would be remiss if we didn't allow some folks to ask some questions. And
Sure.
So what I would ask if you'd introduce yourself and tell Senator Bennet who you are. Gary?
Yeah, Senator Bennet, hi, this is Gary Bolton. I'm the CEO of the Fibre Broadband Association. And first of all, I want to thank you for your leadership for this country. You and Senator Portman and Senator King have done a fantastic job of building the framework for our future. And, we can say the results of that on May 13th when the NOFO came out. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And then I noticed last year in March, you put a letter out. You led a congressional letter to say we need to increase our minimum definition of broadband to 100 by 100. Where do you see that going, and what's next steps for that?
Well, I think that what we ended up with in this bill in BEAD was a compromise of 100 to over 20, but with the opportunity for communities that want to go higher or faster to be prioritized as states roll out, as states like Colorado make decisions about which projects are going to be funded first. So my interest in this very much was in future-proofing the network. I got so sick and tired of hearing people say, rural communities don't need it. Rural communities don't need it, knowing that, students actually may very well need it to do, the most interesting cutting-edge work, and that small businesses and farmers dealing with precision agriculture might need some version of it someday. So we didn't get to the fastest speeds that I had put in my original bill, but I think we came to a compromise that makes even more sense maybe than what I proposed, because it leaves it to local communities working with states to make a decision about what they need and what they're capable of. The most important part for me is that it's not going to end up the way the funding historically has happened, which is half-hearted gestures to building out speeds that are obsolete by the time the networks are lit.
Thanks, Senator. Really appreciate how great a staff you have. They've been fantastic to work with.
Thank you. Vivek is here, but I won't tell him that you said that.
So, Senator Bennet, we have another question for you. And before Nate Wallowitz asked his question, I just wanted to say that Nate told me something interesting last week that I think people should know, that your staff actually sought input from a diverse group of people in Colorado as you were authoring the Bridge Act, and so we're very grateful for that. And so with that, Nate, go ahead and ask your question.
Good morning, Senator Nate Wallowitz. I'm the Regional Broadband Director for Northwest Colorado Council of Governments. Thank you.
Nate.
Hey, and thank you to your staff. How do we ensure our economically challenged communities within larger Colorado cities receive equitable access and opportunities for improved broadband network infrastructure within these cities, so the clusters of other communities that may not always get served within the larger
You're asking about big cities like on the Front Range, Nate, or?
Some on the Front Range, but also some in the more rural parts of our state.
Yeah,
as well.
I think that, you know, the bill is structured so that, first of all, let me say thank you, Nate, for your help and the help of the Northwest Council of Governments. Instrumental in writing the bill. And, you know, I often say that my bills are not written in Washington, D.C., and it's true. They're written, you know, in neighborhoods and in communities in kitchen tables in places in Colorado, and that makes the bills better. That's why, you know, there were other proposals than the Bridge Act to do this, but I think the fact that it was written by people who actually knew what they were doing, that's not me, it's all of you and my staff, and it had tripartisan support. But I think basically the mix between focusing on build out to higher speeds and subsidies to address the needs of people who might live in a place that's got infrastructure already built out, but simply can't afford broadband. And that's a lot of people in our state. I think about, you know, the kids, I think there are at least 30% of the kids in Aurora, for example, you know, don't have any access to broadband, even though broadband goes right by their homes. And that's, during the pandemic, we learned that was a tragedy. I mean, it really was a national tragedy, because you had families that might have even been scraping by to afford broadband, but if there were 3 or 4 devices in the, you know, at work in the family, and parents needed to use them for work and kids needed to use them for school, it just was an untenable situation. And that's what we're trying to cure with this bill.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So do we have any more questions from the audience? If not, I have one last question for you, sir.
Absolutely. Did it snow there?
Yes, it did. We got about woke up to about 6 or 7 inches of new snow. So
I left my house with about 5 large branches on my front lawn, and I'm worried. I've been worrying about it ever since. I have to get back on Thursday to deal with it.
So my question to you is: do you have any concerns about? Now we'll talk a little bit about this throughout the conference, but do you have any concerns about the impact of supply chain issues, or supply chain shortages, and getting BEAD done in a timely manner?
I do. I absolutely do. I think it's something we all need to be focused on, and we need to be worried about. I think in the short term, we've got to do what we can to unstick supplies where we've had breakdowns as a result of fragile supply chains that have not dealt well with the, you know, with a growing economy and increasing consumer demand for all kinds of things. It's really been a tough moment that's helped contribute to the inflation that we've seen, in addition to the Federal Reserve's intervention in our economy. But I really think over the long term we need to think very hard about which of these supply chains we're going to bring back to our country. And I think we have an opportunity. There's been a lot of reflection lately, and I've shared in this that, you know, a lot of the promises that were made about what would happen to the global economy and to our economy if we prioritized people making stuff as cheaply as possible in China over lots of other values like our own supply chains and our national security. You know, we're at a moment in American history where I think we're going to revisit those questions, you know, with respect to telecom and with respect to things like pharmaceuticals and energy as well. So I think in the short term, we've some very serious Gordian knots to unsnarl. In the long term, I think there's huge opportunity for us to invest in this country again and build an economy that when it grows for everybody, not just the people at the very top. And we've already been working, in the bill that the China Competes bill or Endless Frontiers bill, whatever it's now called, it's got $50 billion in it for semiconductors. That's an effort to say, having 85% of the world's semiconductors and more than 90% of the most significant semiconductors produced in Taiwan is not a great national security situation for us. And in that bill, there's an additional $2.5 billion or so for open radio network stuff, that ORAN work that I have been working on in order to make sure that we don't have to rely on China to build out the 5G network in the United States. So there's a lot for us to do here, and I appreciate you raising it, and I just want to say again how grateful I am for all of your leadership, and please let us know how we can help make sure the implementation in Colorado is as excellent as it can possibly be.
Well, thank you, Senator Bennet, for your time. We really appreciate it, and appreciate all your hard work as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Great to see you. I can't see you, but nice to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. So now, the next person I get to bring up here has got a lot of hard work to do. Please join me in welcoming Brandy Ryder up to the stage. Brandy is our new Colorado Broadband Office Executive Director, and quite frankly, we have to do what we can to support her. She's got a heavy lift in front of her, and we are very grateful that you took this job on, so thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that great introduction, and it's obviously always great to follow Senator Bennet. No pressure at all. But yes, so I'm Brandy Ryder. I am the new Executive Director of the Colorado Broadband Office, and it is a pleasure and honor to serve in this role during this historic time. I'm very excited to lead the charge for Colorado, and I know we have a lot of work to do, but I'm confident in the state's ability and my team's ability to execute these very, very special dollars and very historic dollars in our communities. I started in February, so I'm fairly new to the role, but I'm not new to broadband. My background, I was a former town manager in rural Colorado. I still live in rural Colorado on the western slope in the town of Eagle. And just like Senator Bennet said, when the global pandemic hit, broadband was one of the main reasons why we couldn't do anything in our town, whether it was business, businesses being open, being able to run our council meetings, our school districts suffered. It just, I know everybody's heard this before, but it's very, very, very real in rural Colorado. And so I want to in my new role, this is a passion project for me. I do want to solve these issues for our communities across Colorado. And there's a lot of things that we're doing as a state of Colorado in preparation for spending these funds. I just want to cover a couple of those this morning. But earlier this year, Governor Jared Polis issued an executive order which laid out the goals and strategies for the state of Colorado and the Colorado Broadband Office. And so I want to cover a little bit of that. The title of the executive order is very fitting. It's Accelerating Broadband Deployment in Colorado, and it is a top priority of the administration, and I'm happy to be part of the goals and strategies that we will accomplish over the next several years. We also, this legislative session, we had a lot of activity in the broadband space, and basically our legislation will expand our broadband initiatives across the state, making it a little bit easier for some of you to work with the state and take advantage of these funds. And then obviously there's the increase in federal funding opportunities. I know we're talking a lot about that at this conference. I know I talked a little bit about it yesterday, but it's incredible the opportunities that we have in front of us. And then obviously, what's most important is getting broadband deployed through partnerships. So that's public-private partnerships, and the state is prioritizing public-private partnerships in our funding. So those are all of the kind of the main highlights of how we're going to get broadband done for Colorado. But I want to go back to the executive order because that does set the framework for my work. Governor Polis would like to hook or connect 99% of Colorado households to high-speed internet by 2027. And that's 100 over 20. So it aligns really nicely with our federal funding requirements. Of course, we would love to see 100 symmetrical, and we will prioritize projects that do offer that for our citizens and businesses. I know Governor Polis said it's an ambitious goal, and that does not scare me. As a matter of fact, I love ambitious goals. That's been what I've kind of set my whole career on. Let's go accomplish the impossible. And so I'm happy to hopefully meet that goal, and by 2027 have 99% of Coloradans connected to high-speed internet. It also called out for a statewide strategic plan. I know if you've read the BEAD NOFO, it does require states to have a 5-year strategic plan. So we're right on track with that. We'll be getting out into Colorado this year over the summer, asking communities for their existing plans, but also developing strategies and goals for our communities that do not have the plans in place to really know how to get to high-speed internet for their community. It also called out interagency coordination. So that's with our partners like the Colorado Department of Transportation, Department of Regulatory Affairs, really streamlining our processes so it's easier for providers to build broadband in the field. And there's also focused planning around certain constituents, certain stakeholder groups. So community anchor institutions, tourism, state prisons, parks, tribes, telemedicine, and rural communities. I like to say this is kind of a catch-all. It includes mostly everybody in Colorado. So I'm really excited that the governor's covering all of Colorado in his executive order. And so we did, through the last legislative session, we did expand broadband opportunities through our regulatory process. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of bills that really speak to the governor's goals and strategies. So House Bill 21-1289, it invested $75 million of the state of Colorado's ARPA funds in the digital inclusion program. And so there's different allocations to that, but $35 million will go towards our digital inclusion program, which includes $20 million to the Southern Ute and Ute Mountain, or $20 million to the Southern Ute and Ute Mountain tribes. And then another $15 million invested in telehealth and telemedicine. And then we also have $35 million allocated to our broadband stimulus grant program. And this is money that's allocated through our broadband deployment fund, where ISPs and providers can apply to our fund. We allocate about $5 million a year to build broadband high-speed internet. These are federal funds, so if you're interested in applying, you do have to follow those guidelines, but we think this is a real opportunity to keep continuing the investment in broadband. And then there's also $5 million that was allocated to Colorado Department of Local Affairs for their digital interconnectivity program. So those funds will be going out the door to communities that are interested in building middle-mile broadband in their communities. Another key piece of legislation was Senate Bill 2160. And this is, we allocated $5 million to our digital inclusion grant program. And this is money that was set aside to offer discounts for people, Coloradans who income qualify, to have their telemedicine bills discounted by 50%. We did reallocate this money to the Office of eHealth and Innovation to manage this fund. So there's opportunities in telehealth and telemedicine for our citizens in Colorado. And then we have House Bill 22-83, which this is our CDOT grant. This is what I call our CDOT legislation, actually. And really what this does is it really sets the stage and framework for our Colorado Department of Transportation to put policies and systems in place for their permitting and their use of rights-of-way. I know some of you have come to me and have said, hey, what are we doing about CDOT's process? And we see CDOT being a key partner in deployment of broadband because they do have fiber along our interstate system in Colorado, and so we want to be able to help them, give them tools to make sure that their systems are efficient for you all so that when you are working with them, it's predictable and it's not brand new every single time. So they're happy to partner on that as well. And then we have House Bill 22-1306, and this is legislation that really cleaned up our grant-making process through the Broadband Deployment Fund. So we shortened our timeframes. So we were required to review grants with a 60-day time frame. We dropped that down to 45 days. We think this is helpful because I know a lot of us, we talked a little bit earlier about supply chain issues. I know by the time you get an award for a grant, the price escalates within, within that time frame by 10, 20% often case. So we're happy about streamlining that. And then we also extended the grant cycle past 2 years, so to account for those delays in your projects. And there's a couple of other provisions that we think will really help streamline the process to get those dollars out there in community. So then lastly, like I said, we're talking a lot about funding. It's a great time to be in broadband. I'm really happy to be in this role because there is funding. It's really hard to do a job when you don't have funding. So I just want to kind of highlight how the state's going to approach our federal funds. We are going to participate in every federal funding program we can. We think it's key in reaching the governor's goal of 99%. And so, like I said, we allocated $75 million of our ARPA money through state and local fiscal recovery for broadband deployment. We also are taking advantage of the Capital Projects Fund that's administered through the Treasury Department. The state received $171 million for that, so we're going to be executing that over the next 2 years, 3 years. And then obviously there's BEAD. The state of Colorado might receive up to $700 million in BEAD funding. And so I know every state gets at a minimum $100 million, but we could receive around up to $700 million. I know that's a huge swing, but it's based on data, so to be continued on how much money that is. But as soon as we know, we'll put out a communication on that. And then we also have funds available to us, about $900,000 for our digital equity planning. And so we'll be working with the Office of Future of Work on that. They already have some really great programs we're working on, but we think that it's really important to educate and be inclusive for digital equity so that when people do have internet, they know how to use it. And we see it as an opportunity to upskill our residents so that they can learn how to use technology, but also, work in industries where there is technology. So we see it as a win-win. And then obviously there's the Middle Mile program through IIJA. The state of Colorado will also take advantage of that. So those are the federal funding programs that are on the radar for the state of Colorado. And our approach is that we're going to take advantage of them to build out fiber. And we can't do this without partnerships. So I just want to highlight a couple of key partnerships that the state's going to support and continue to work with state agencies on. But we're going to partner with CDOT, of course, Colorado Department of Transportation, the Office of Future Work, the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, because broadband is a function of economic development. Obviously, the Colorado Broadband Office and the Office of Information Technology. And then I want to highlight the Department of Local Affairs real quickly. The Department of Local Affairs, I don't know if there's anybody here from that department, but if it weren't for the Department of Local Affairs, I don't think we'd be this far ahead in Colorado broadband. They were the original agency that allocated portions of their grant dollars that competed with town halls, water facilities, wastewater facilities, parks. They allocated money every year to communities in rural Colorado to build broadband. And so they've been in this space for a very long time. And I just want to give them big kudos for setting the stage for someone like me to come in and help take their practices and the things that made them successful and apply them to CBO, because they were the only ones doing it, as well as the Department of Regulatory Affairs. So Colorado's been at it for a while, but I just want to thank those agencies for doing it before there was funding available. So good job to those two departments. And then obviously partnerships. We can't build broadband in the state of Colorado without partners like you. I know there's a lot of industry people here, and I just want to say that the state of Colorado sees this as a public-private partnership. We're not interested in being in the ISP. We want to support your work, and we want to make sure that you feel supported funding wise, and I always say every time I go anywhere, and I said this yesterday, is if you have ideas for how this gets done effectively and efficiently so that we don't make the same mistakes that we've done in the past, I'm all open ears. And so we can't get this done without you. You guys are going to help us build and deploy broadband across the state of Colorado. So I just want to highlight that really key partnership as well. So that's the state of Colorado broadband. Again, it's been an honor to be here this morning talking about our initiatives. I look forward to working with all of you, and it's a great time to be in broadband, and I'm very optimistic that we'll get this done the right way. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you fix the maps, the broadband maps? Can you fix those too while you're at it?
That's another session.
What are we doing over here? Okay. As I said earlier, this conference wouldn't be what it is without support. And I want to talk a little bit about our next speaker, because Calix has been a very integral part of Mountain Connect for as long as I've owned it. They've always supported it and have been a big collaborator within Mountain Connect. And today, we're lucky to have one of their finest. So please join me in welcoming Martha Galley.
Whoops. So, what would a keynote be without a few PowerPoint slides? So I'm going to be the only one with PowerPoint. Do I need to advance it myself here? Okay, let me just make sure I've got... Okay, good. So I am Martha Galley, and I am the Executive Vice President of Customer Engagement and Services at Calix. Unlike the esteemed speakers before, Senator Bennet and Ms. Ryder, I am not a native telecommunications person. My background is in software and services. And the fact of the matter is that Senator Bennet said that the goal we should all have is to create future-proof networks. So we're going to spend a little bit of time celebrating you with that. But I do have one bone to pick. I distinctly remember when I got on the airplane yesterday, I ordered sunny, warm weather. I don't really know what's up with that, but obviously those of you who are hoping to play golf didn't have a chance to do that. I know that Jeff and his team were heartbroken with that, and so hopefully you'll be able to come back next year and be able to get in all of the social activities that you had planned to take. So, about broadband. Well, we talked a little bit about the opportunity. When in history can those of us remember, who are old enough, remember where supply and demand was so in line? If the pandemic taught us nothing, it's that you are, in fact, a critical, life-supporting, commercial industry-supporting, education-supporting institution. And there are those of you out there who have been doing this for a long time, and those of you, some of whom I've met just this morning, are aspiring because the demand from your communities has never been greater. And so how do you bring together that once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-a-generation supply with all of the great programs, the Middle Mile program, BEAD program, the Digital Broadband Equity program, all of that money in a meaningful way in your communities? Well, my job is to help you understand how some of your peers have done that very successfully, helping their communities prosper and survive. So, what are we talking about when we talk about communities? You know, it used to be when I started working from home that, you know, the sound of the modem was the one sound that everybody knew. Setting up a home office was a Herculean task. Now today we've got, not only are we working from home, I work from home in Reno, Nevada, but we've got education from home, gaming and entertainment from home, health from home. critical, important applications, and each one of the members of the family participating in. How many of you ever imagined that you'd need to allocate bandwidth for those important tasks? A thing of the past. So, to give you some idea about what some of your peers are doing, I'm going to start with Longmont. 26,000 subscribers, a municipality who is no stranger to listening to the community and engaging them in a meaningful way. In fact, I've been told that at town meetings, their subscribers came to them and said, hey, we want high-speed internet just like we had in Denver. The same way that those citizens back in the early 90s said, hey, we want electrification, we want technology that you provide us. So, City of Longmont has come come a long way, and they are now, in fact, a gigabit city. But it took them a good deal of effort to get to that point. They first approached the incumbents. How many of you have approached incumbents in your area to figure out how to bring all of their expertise to bear to help you build out fiber networks in your community? They faced legislative challenges that made it very difficult for municipalities to offer these types of services. And then there were the citizens themselves who thought that ultimately their taxes would go up. It would be, in fact, very difficult for them to support a broadband infrastructure in the community. So they had to educate their citizenry about the taxes and what it would or would not involve. They even went to Google to see if they could entice Google to supply a fiber backbone in their city. And they lost out to Kansas City. Well, when all else failed, they rallied the community. And what did that mean? That meant creating a partnership when they implemented the first fiber network, and they called the program Friends of Fiber. So it became a very, very cool thing in Longmont to be a charter member of the Friends of Fiber. When they did their initial assessment of what it would take to get a return on that investment, they realized they needed about 35% uptake of this Friends of Fiber program. At initial launch, they were able to achieve more than 40%. And that helped them become, over and over again, one of the best places to work from home, and their recognition by PC Magazine. So it's been 7.5 years, roughly, since they've implemented this gigabit city. And what has it enabled them to do? Well, it's enabled them to serve their community during the pandemic. And in fact, one of the things they're very proud of is their ability to connect elderly and retirement communities where digital communications was the only way that people could communicate with their friends and family while they were isolated under pandemic restrictions. And it's built a sense of pride. People tell me that when they walk the streets, citizens proudly exclaim that they helped build the Starlight Network. They were part of that initiative. Next, the other end of the spectrum, in Holyoke, Colorado, PC Telecom, with just 1,600 subs. What is their claim to fame? Their claim to fame is agility and responsiveness. When the pandemic hit, they reached out to the local school system to see how they could help. What did they do? They actually quickly mobilized and helped to digitally enable the entire learn from home program that the school system put into place, so that students could continue their education even under the circumstances that they were experiencing. And they were able to do this with remote provisioning. So the right set of tools and technologies gave them the opportunity to keep their employees safe while doing great things for their community. Questions? Okay. So they needed to be able to customize things like Zoom meetings from work from home. How do you balance the bandwidth so that you can achieve, if you will, harmony at home, so that during the workday, the adults can work, and in the evenings, we've got an opportunity for kids to play and be entertained. Jessica Koch has said that the biggest opportunity for them was that they can collaborate and figure out what needed to be done immediately in their community. So, partnerships with the community. And what are they willing to do to service that community? Well, they're willing to run 100 miles of broadband to service small housing projects, 50 hookups. They're also willing to reclaim, if you will, services where the incumbent broadband providers are no longer willing to support the infrastructure that was in place. In fact, they said, well, if it breaks, we're not going to go fix it. So responding quickly and effectively to their community's needs. Last and certainly not least, Jade. We've all heard a lot about Jade as a provider. 3,600 subscribers in a very competitive multi-county area of Colorado. And what they are all about is making sure that they understand their subscribers' personal requirements. They're building trust. Building trust means keeping their subscribers safe. And what they've been able to do with the right tools and technology is to prevent over 22,000 security intrusions on a monthly basis. When you keep your community safe and you build trust, you're able to build your business. And they were able to, in fact, generate a 100% increase in their revenue against that customer base. So, what do all these service providers have in common? Like many of you there. And by the way, all of these companies, I believe, are in attendance at the conference today. So if you'd like to understand more about their stories, please feel free to approach them and get some more information. So what do they have in common? What they have in common is being small. Small, in this case, means agile. And they're able to have a significant impact in their communities because of that agility. Local also means personalized. Personalized means effective. And their effectiveness helps them not only build great communities, but build great businesses. And lastly, they're all using the right tools to build future-proof networks, as Senator Bennet referred to. So we'd like to have an opportunity to partner with you to help you build future-proof networks and build strength in your communities by building your business. Come see us at our booth, and thank you very much. Jeff.
All right, I'm getting absolutely murdered. Does everybody have a pen? You need to write this down, because I'm not going to repeat it again. Just kidding. The password for the Wi-Fi. We are, after all, at a broadband conference, are we not? The password is CO Broadband 2022. All right? Don't ask me again. That's it. All right, what? Did I mention uppercase or lowercase? It's all lowercase, sir. All right, so the moment most of you have been waiting for, we have yet another amazing sponsor this year helping to support the event, and so what I would like to do is invite Mr. Jace Wilson up to the stage. Jace. So, here's what I love about this man. He never seems to run out of energy or enthusiasm. And he never seems to run out of energy and enthusiasm for what we're doing in this industry. And I applaud him, and I applaud his team. He's got a great team as well. He doesn't listen all the time. He just does his own thing. He's one of those guys who...
What were you saying?
Huh? So, yeah, see? He asked for permission later, or forgiveness later, so. But anyways, he has added a lot to this year's event, and it really wouldn't be the same without you. So thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Happy snow. If you're here, your work connects more families and businesses to better broadband, and we want to say at minimum, thank you for doing that. And for making time for Mountain Connect 2022, especially in the snow and crazy weather. And I want to say a quick thank you to Jeff Klavinsky, who's convened this gathering for 12 years now, as a way of giving back to the industry that's given him so much. And yeah, Jeff. And to Douglas Adams, the Hitchhiker's Guide author and Jeff's new co-organizer, for helping to get this year's event ready. And to both for letting me wear a trucker hat in front of Broadband's best and brightest, against their professional advice. So thanks, y'all, for your patience. And, you're not here to see me, you're here to see the man with the plan, Mr. Alan Davidson. But I want to say quickly, welcome to the post-NOFO glow. It's a few days since the NTIA just dropped the largest and most impactful document in the history of broadband, right? And it's months before our nation's largest ever investment in public broadband is going to start flowing into states and projects, and that's really exciting. And there's just one thing to know about that everything about the last mile just changed, right? And there will be winners and there will be losers. And from our early teardowns of the NOFO, it looks like incumbent monopolies should be worried, right? Which is what we're really excited about, is local broadband winning. So with tools like local coordination and challenge process that works for communities, NTIA built a powerful toolkit for local partnerships that want to rise up and get their share of the billions of dollars for broadband. So Broadband Money is really honored, to present this year's conference keynote, which is Alan Davidson, NTIA's head. And it's really hard to picture a better person to address this room full of top broadband policymakers, advocates, investors, builders. Thank you all for what you do. And as a nation, I think that we're lucky to have Alan at the helm of the hardworking NTIA, as they're starting to work, with states to smartly and quickly deploy tens of billions of dollars into broadband. And Alan gets that cross-sector collaboration is a key to maximizing return on public investment, And, he's not afraid of the administration's 100% access mandate. And the NOFO shows that he intends to work with his team to get the job done, so that's super cool. And his fireside chat's going to be hosted in a few minutes by Drew Clark of Broadband Breakfast, who works tirelessly towards his mantra of better broadband, better lives, and is an all-around great dude. If you don't know him, you should. But for providers and communities who want to get a quick head start on competition, I want to show you a quick preview of the BEAD grant start page that just launched this morning on Broadband Money. It's the simplest way to apply for and win your share of BEAD, and to see your territory in all new light with collaborators and community partners. And then it helps you line up funding sources for match capital, which you're going to need up front with your application in this round, so you don't waste time in scores of conversations or find out too late that you don't have this key ingredient. So our job at Broadband.money is to help local broadband win. And it's, community networks, co-ops, mom and pops, tribes. We think that all should team up with the communities they serve and rise up to get their share of the broadband funds. And each of Broadband Money's 650 applicants is unique, but they share the same goal that many of you in the room do, and it's to connect more people to better broadband. And while some are waiting on FCC's fabric softener, others are getting ready now to do your own research, to see your area, to build thoughtful, well-composed application models, not static PDFs. With many stakeholders and collaborators in an environment together, iterating towards the best possible outcome. And it's also a way to answer questions once, not dozens of times, which we know you're busy connecting people, so. And it's also automating ongoing monitoring, reporting, and performance management so that you can focus on better serving subscribers while complying with NTIA state and local guidelines. There's even turnkey ACP, so you can deliver a seamless experience for families in need. And we built Broadband Money to help make the most of our historic public investment as the start page for local partnerships to get their share, the simplest way to get ready. And we asked you to find your path ahead at Broadband.money and to stop by this afternoon for demos and ice cream at our booth. Yeah. So I'll shut up. I just want to say that Alan knows that every American deserves a chance, right? That in the remote era, access for all is the bedrock of liberty and justice for all. And to build the America that Poet Laureate and future poetess Amanda Gorman called benevolent but bold, fierce and free. In her words, we must lift our gaze to not what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know that to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. And I want to say thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for all you do, because you know that it's not about billions for broadband. This is about connecting real people to better lives. Thank you, and Alan Davidson and Drew Clark, ladies and gentlemen.
Please.
Okay, all right.
Alan, welcome. It's so exciting to be here outside of the sweltering heat of Washington.
It's definitely outside.
And into the snow of Colorado. Alan, I understand you wanted to say a couple words as a welcome to Colorado and to our audience here at Mountain Connect.
Well, thank you, Drew, and thank you, Mountain Connect, for having us, for hosting this event, for getting this crowd together, and for inviting me to speak here. So this is my first, I think, real major public appearance since our big announcement less than 2 weeks ago at the Department of Commerce at NTIA, launching our Internet for All initiative and our $48 billion in funding to connect everybody in America. I will just say, we've been talking about the digital divide in this country for over 20 years. Finally, thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, the leadership of a lot of folks in the House and Senate, you heard Senator Bennet a little while ago, and President Biden, we have the resources to really make structural change, to really address this mission of closing the digital divide, and that's pretty exciting. So we're very excited at NTIA to be launching this program, to be doing this work. We've been grateful for the response so far. Like I say, it's been about 2 weeks. We've heard a lot from stakeholders. We've heard a lot from communities. We've heard from the provider community, which we very much know we want to engage with, need to engage with, who are going to actually build this. And we've heard from industry. We've heard from a lot of folks. And it's going to take a lot of folks if we're going to meet this mission, the mission of connecting everybody in America and closing the digital divide. I will say a key part of this for us is working with states. The bulk of the money that we're giving out, about $42 billion of it, goes to a state grant program. Money will go to the states will do the grant making. The starting point for this is the states have to submit letters of intent, indicate their interest. So far, less than a week into the program, well, I guess a little bit more, we're now got 25 states and territories signed up, which is great. And so the last thing I'll just say is that's going to be a critical part of this, and we need people's help to connect, to push the states to engage. So we've got 25 states engaged, 35 states who've signed up and said that they're going to be in here, states and territories, and so this is a big deal for us. The last thing I just say is, for us, this is part of a big mission, and I know a lot of you care about this too. Generations before us brought water, brought electricity to rural America, built the interstate highway system. We really feel that this is this generation's infrastructure project to build. Our infrastructure project to build is connecting everybody with the digital world. And I really believe that when we look back 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we will see this as a moment where our generation stepped up in the way that prior generations did and worked to make sure that everybody had access and the ability to thrive in the new modern economy that we're building. So I'm super excited to be here with you all, and thank you, Drew.
Well, we can just applaud and go home.
There you go.
No, that is important to start with that end goal in mind. Like, where do we want to be? How do we want to have seen this program looking in the rearview mirror? And when we were last together, Alan, at Broadband Breakfast for Lunch, you said that the Biden administration is not going to be happy until every American has 100 megabits down and 20 megabits up broadband, which is the underserved definition in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And whenever I have a chance to interview someone like you, Alan, the big question is, okay, big picture or details? Big picture or details? And we talked a lot, and I'm sure we will talk some more about big picture, but there's a lot of people here who want to know some of those details. So I do want to kind of drill in a little bit to that. And let me just start off with what you said just now, that 25 states have submitted their letter of intent, 35 have said they're going to submit their letters of intent. What about that remaining 15? I know it's only been less than 2 weeks, but are there any states out there that are not ramping and rushing to put in the paperwork to get part of this program?
So I'd say, just as a starting point, our goal is every state and every territory, right? I mean, our mission, the mission that we've been given, is to make sure that everybody in America has the ability to connect to high-speed, affordable internet access. We can only do that if we've got every state and territory on board. So this launch that we had 2 weeks ago is really just the starting gun for us. It's launching these programs, and now the key is to get the states on board. We're very pleased, honestly. This was better than we thought it would be, to be honest, I think. And, there's some paperwork involved. Their states have to figure out who their person is and how they do this letter of intent. We've got we've tried to make it super easy for them. We know that there are some states that are further along than other states. We just heard from your state broadband leader here in Colorado, folks, who's great, and we're not worried about Colorado. Okay. But we know that there are other states that are further behind, and we're going to be working with them. So probably the biggest and most important thing that we've been doing within NTIA is staffing up to support the states and to work with the states. So we've built out a state team within NTIA. We're going to have a person assigned to each state. Every state will know who they can call in the federal government at NTIA to make sure that they are doing what they need to do. And there's somebody who's going to wake up every day and think, how do I make sure Colorado succeeds? How do I make sure Montana succeeds, et cetera? And so we are going to be pushing. They have till July 18th. We've got time. But this was really the starting gun, and so far we're out of the gate strong.
So May 13th was the kickoff, and you also unveiled a new website, Internet for All, right? And is that designed to be the means for communicating with states, or is that more like a public outreach, or is it trying to do both?
It's a little both, and we're hoping it is a public-facing. It's designed to speak to different audiences. It'll be a place where there are a lot of resources, links to webinars, places to get technical assistance, guidance as we put it up, connections to other programs in the federal government, because it's not just the programs that we're administering that are going to matter, and we're trying to have a one-stop where people can go look, just like the tool that we just saw. That was terrific, by the way. I do think that there will be a lot of deep, direct connection to states. We're building we're using technology. We've got a Salesforce platform to share, the details. States will sign up. There will be ways. We're using, modern customer management technology to make sure that we're keeping in touch with states, not just on this one program that we're talking about, the BEAD program, the state grant program, but all the other programs that we're connecting with them on.
So again, high level, the BEAD program, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, is the $42.5 billion. We'll talk mostly about that, but you also kind of, ahead of when you needed to, kicked out the Middle Mile Notice of Funding Opportunity and the Digital Equity Act Notice of Funding Opportunity, and you have all those on that Internet for All website, and you're doing the webinars and at Broadband Breakfast and Broadband.money. We've been covering those, focusing on those, making sure that all that information is out there. So to drill into the BEAD program, there's a lot of concern that I've been hearing about it's going to take a long time for this money to get out there because of you got to get the 5-year plans in, the states have to have their approvals. Could you just walk us through a little bit of the timelines and this concern that it's going to take 12, 15, 18 months for the first money to be out there?
Right. Well, I think there's a tension between our strong desire to get money out there quickly, but also our felt need, our absolute need to do this right. And I think you see that reflected in the law as it was passed. There's a very clear timeline, a structure that's built into the law that says how we're supposed to do this. And it starts with good maps, right? The process is very clear. The FCC's working on mapping, and we need to follow those maps, and we will use those maps for our allocation of funding among the states, and ultimately for states to decide where they're going to spend their money themselves. The good news is it's not like we just have to wait for this and there's nothing else happening. As I said, this is sort of the starting gun for us on a number of programs. We're launching a middle mile program. That middle mile program, that grant making is going to happen much more quickly. It's going to start this year, where we're going to be starting to accept grant applications. You'll be hearing more about that. And it's actually, whether by accident or by design, it's the right approach, right? We'll be doing our middle mile work first. That will then hopefully be, the idea is that's a force multiplier for our last mile work that we'll be funding through BEAD. You'll see digital equity planning grants rolling out. We have a set of other monies from other places, from prior bills, including tribal funding that you're going to see, our Connected Minority Communities grants. So there's a lot of grant making that you will see even in the short run. And there are other parts of the government. The FCC's got its RDOF, Rural Development Fund.
Right.
Treasury got its fund. We're trying to pull these things all together. So even as we are waiting to make sure we do the state grant, that big state grant program the right way, you'll see a lot of other money going out the door.
Oh, and that's a great point, connecting these other grants, making sure they are part and parcel of the process. Let's talk a little bit about the state role and how much, this is something we talked about a month ago, how much flexibility states would have. So what's your view on how you came out? Do you feel states have enough flexibility, or do they really need to kind of hearken to all these rules that you've laid out?
Well, again, the starting point for us was the idea that not every state is built the same way, that the needs of different states are going to be different. We know that the needs of Rhode Island are really different than the needs of Colorado or Montana or Alaska. And so we wanted to make sure we're building in a lot of flexibility in this for the states to meet their needs. At the same time, we did feel like there was a baseline of rules. If we're spending $42 billion of federal money, you can be sure we need to make sure there's some real accountability there. There are real requirements on sub-grantees. We also had certain values that Congress put into the statute. We want to welcome new entrants and make sure that that new entrants are able to join. We care about affordability, so you see in the NOFO some basic requirements. We left flexibility in there for states to meet these requirements in different ways, and so we do expect that states will take different states will take different approaches, but there are some baseline values that are in there that we're going to expect from everybody.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about that. What is the baseline value of affordability? How does that get reflected in the NOFO?
That's so I think from the beginning, we have recognized that affordability is a key part of it. The president himself talked about this just even 2 weeks ago in the Rose Garden.
With that announcement that all of these companies are going to be part of the Affordable Connectivity Program and what else, Alan?
Exactly. Well, right. And I think just speaking to the notion that affordability is a key piece of this, you can't, we could have a connection going past somebody's house. It doesn't do them any good if they can't afford it to get online, right? So this has been Congress recognized this, the president recognized this. In the announcements that we made clear, and particularly in this BEAD program, probably three different things. One, every provider's got to have a low-cost option. States will define that differently. We gave some examples in the NOFO of what that could look like, but there has to be a low-cost option for low-income Americans. Mm-hmm. We also say that states have to demonstrate an approach to affordability. So how are we going to make sure that there's affordability built into these plans in other ways? And the last is we made affordability a key part of the prioritization criteria that states need to use when they do competitive grant making. So there are a bunch of different criteria that states are required to use, but we wanted to make sure that affordability was part of it, so that that when grants are made, there's an eye towards not just the cost to the government, but also making sure that long-term there'll be a guarantee of some affordability.
Well, on the other hand of this, good rules and good prescriptions, you have the sense of overly prescription or overly rules. Right. And there are people who are saying there's a lot of rules in this NOFO. And I mean, let me just highlight one, the letter of credit requirement. Many people say that that's, you know, an unnecessary imposition to put in there. What's your response to that, Alan?
Well, I mean, we did look at some of our past experience in grant making, look to how others do. I think part of the issue in here, again, it comes back to we want flexibility, we want to welcome new entrants, but we also need to make sure, you know, that federal money is being spent wisely. And we have heard stories in the past and had experiences in the past where it hasn't been. So we are here to make sure that there's going to be proper oversight and accountability. Now, we're very open-minded about feedback here. If we've gone in some direction here, that this is not the end of the story, right? So if there are particular requirements that we've put in that folks find to be particularly problematic, we want to hear that. But I will say, you know, there was a lot of work that went into those requirements, and I will say we pushed ourselves to make sure that we were making things as easy and as friendly to new entrants as possible, while making sure that we're taking care of taxpayer dollars.
When you say it's not the end of the story, what does that mean? This is a final rule, is it not?
This is our notice of funding, and it basically lays out the basic requirements. There are a lot of things that are not included in here. Mm-hmm. We actually made for those who've looked at these documents, they're like 50, 100-page documents. They're long documents. They've got a lot of federal bureaucratic language in them. This will sound funny, but we actually tried to make them as short as we could. We did that by...
Below 100 pages, 98 pages is not...
98 pages, below 100 pages, I'd love to say. We had hoped it would be shorter, but there was a lot to say. Even so, we tried to take the principle, if it didn't need to be in this notice, it's not there, right? And so there are other issues, supply chain issues, workforce issues, where we will be offering future guidance and also looking for future input on them. And so not everything is in this notice. So we anticipate an ongoing process of technical assistance with states, with providers, with communities. We expect that there will be further guidance that's going to come out on some of these issues.
Can you address another specific one? Will it require congressional action to prevent the IIJA funds from being taxable income to commercial grantees? How do you see this issue resolving itself?
That is a big issue. We know that this is a big issue for providers, for everybody. I mean, we would like to make sure that these dollars, from our own selfish point of view, our mission is to connect everybody. And at some level, $42 billion doesn't go as far as it used to. I don't know. We want to make sure it goes as far as it can. And so we're keenly aware of this issue about taxation. I would just say it's an issue of ongoing conversation within the administration. It's not something that would be addressed in these notices, but I'll just say that's an area where you could expect to hear and see more. There's a lot of energy going into making.
What about Buy American provisions? Yeah. Obviously, there is a law on this subject, but there's also a waiver process. So could you just talk about the balance there when it's just going to be hard to get 55% of your fiber made in the United States?
Right. So that's another great example of an area where you can expect to see future guidance, more interest. There are very clear Buy America provisions in the statute. Mm-hmm. We mentioned, we acknowledge them. I will just say we will be following those requirements, and part of that is for a very good reason, which is part of the hope of a statute like this, of an initiative like this, is to promote jobs in America, to promote manufacturing in America, and I think Congress very intentionally put those provisions in there to do that. I think Senator Bennet alluded to that as well. At the same time, we're clear-eyed about the challenges that are going to be ahead. We've heard about them from many providers. We know that it's hard, that telecommunications networks are going to be, present unique challenges in this. And so all I can say is we're going to be following these provisions. The provisions allow for waivers. The bar will be high on those waivers, but we expect that there will be waivers.
We certainly want to get good questions. We're going to turn to the audience here, and we also have online questions. I've been asking some of those, and if you have other questions and want to ask, please do so. But Alan, let's come back to this core issue of the technologies that are going to be used and how they're going to be deployed to reach certain areas. So obviously there's areas of the country that meet let's put it the other way. They do not meet the served threshold that are not 25 by 3, and those are obviously crucial areas. But you also seem to, in the NOFO, give similar treatment to the 100 by 20 areas, the underserved areas. Could you just talk a little bit more, and obviously we started this conversation some weeks ago about how a project is going to incorporate areas that may have like a small cable cable plant that might meet the served definition but doesn't meet the underserved definition. How is that going to roll out? How do you see a kind of a project coming in and meeting these definitions?
You know, I'm not sure that we treat these classes of projects exactly the same. I mean, the statute, again, that we've been given, the law that Congress passed is pretty clear. It's focused on making sure that the unserved, defined as those under 25.3, are addressed first, right? And then for states who can show that they've addressed that, they can use the money to address the underserved, those under 103. And then there's other opportunities to use the money for community anchor institutions, other non-deployment activities. I think that the way we've written this is designed to show that, yes, the priority continues to be making sure that we serve all of the unserved first. But we recognize the practicalities of this for a state that's doing a grant-making process. And for states that can show, that can demonstrate in their plans that they are going to reach all the unserved, they can, in their grant-making, do grant-making for the underserved as well. And if we've been satisfied that so there's not a temporal requirement, right? You don't have to do all the unserved. Then when you're done with all the unserved, years later, go to the underserved.
That is a great point, Alan, and just to underscore that, because I think sometimes Congress gets this mindset, oh no, everything's going to get done 25.3, and right. Then but you're basically saying doesn't need to be in that time period. You can have a plan that covers everyone right. That doesn't meet the underserved definition.
Absolutely, and I think we're just trying to be really pragmatic about how this is going to roll out and how we can make it roll out effectively and well for states. And so yes, the notion that we would do all the grant making and build out all of the 25.3 unserved and then come back years later and do the underserved just did not seem practicable or the intent of Congress. So I think the statute's pretty clear. The states need to demonstrate, and we will hold them to this, that they're going to reach all the unserved. But we know, our modeling, we expect that there'll be plenty of states that are going to, with the money they've been given, have no trouble reaching all the unserved. And so we want to make sure we give them the opportunity to do these other things, including reaching out to the underserved. And the other thing is, we know that for providers, practically speaking, we want them to be able to have economically effective projects that are going to survive economically over time. And for many of them, that will mean serving unserved and underserved together. As long as there's demonstrated, we know that unserved is met, we will allow states to move forward with those plans.
Well, I have more questions, but I don't want to hog the time. Our host for the event, Jeff Bavinski, is over here. Jeff, you have a question for Alan. Go for it.
Yes, sir. So before I ask my question, I thought I'd give you a little bit of history. So this conference actually started in response to the ARA funds that the state of Colorado received in 2009. And I think you could argue that one of the issues and challenges with the overall project itself was the lack of oversight. So my question to you is, how do we make sure the money goes where it needs to go, and what is the foundation of oversight?
So
great point about oversight.
It's a great point. It's a great question, and we've tried, and we will be building in oversight both at the federal level and requiring it at the state level, right? So the starting point for us is that oversight is essential. We are stewards of federal money, taxpayer dollars here. Again, I also go back to we will not meet our mission. We will not be able to connect everybody if the money is wasted. So we have a keen interest in making sure that there's strong oversight about how the money is spent. We do that in a couple of different ways. The biggest hook for us is the approval of these state plans. And we will be looking to these state plans. We will hold states feet to the fire on making sure that there are real accountability mechanisms built in. We spell out some of those accountability requirements that we expect to see in these notices that we've put out. And the last thing I'll say is transparency. I think we believe that transparency is a critical piece. They say sunlight is the best disinfectant. And we will be transparent about how we approach this. We expect states to be transparent about their planning and about their requirements and about where grant money is going. And I think this is a key lesson that we've all learned over the last decade.
Let's keep the conversation going, but let me invite questioners to come. I see we have them here, so let's go ahead and turn to Sean Gonsalves of Muni Networks.
Hi, Sean Gonsalves, excuse me. Thank you for being here, Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Question, and I know there's some specific language in the NOFO as it relates to grant access for municipalities and such. Our organization and a handful of others track, among other things, track which states have preemption laws that prevent or erect barriers to municipal broadband, et cetera. My question is, those states that have those preemption laws on the books, do they risk not being able to participate in the BEAD program with those laws without specifically waiving some of those laws? Or so how will NTIA view those? Thank you.
Yeah. We addressed this to some extent in our notice. So the key principle here is we want to make sure that these programs are inclusive. And in fact, the law says that the programs must allow a wide variety of potential providers, lots of different models, community networks, nonprofits, rural cooperatives, right? The statute actually says they can't be prohibited. We echo that in our notice, and we also know, and I will just say that in many circumstances, these varieties of different providers have been incredibly important. There's a lot of data that shows that, for example, especially in these unserved areas, especially in these hard-to-reach places, municipalities can play a very, very critical role. So, yeah, that's it. So we address that in the notice. We are going to press states to make sure that they're doing all that they can do under their laws to be including those.
Well, it's worth calling out what you actually say in the NOFO on page 50 and 51. You say that for those...
Drew comes very prepared. If people, for those who haven't sat with him before, this is very typical.
For those states that do have laws that would preclude it, NTIA, you say, strongly encourages eligible entity states to waive all such laws for purposes of the program. If an eligible entity does not do so, waive those laws, those restrictive laws, the state must identify all such laws in its initial proposal and describe how the laws will be applied in connection with the competition for subgrants. Those are pretty strong words there, Alan.
We are doing all we can to lean into the idea that we believe there's going to be a variety of approaches, that communities play a huge role here, and we're going to try and do all we can under law. States have their laws. We're going to try and do all we can under law to pressure states and to make sure that states are transparent where they're not able to meet them.
Yeah, wonderful. Question on this over here. Please identify yourself.
Yes, Ernie Staten, Fair Lawn Gig. Good morning, Alan. So I'm going to couple on that question, and I'm going to dive a little deeper into it. The middle mile funding that you have proposed, and we've seen the notice, that goes as far as to say local there, where most of them say most of the funding is under state oversight, but this goes all the way to local. So if your state does not get involved, will this go all the way to the local in that particular state?
So I think that there's...
If a state doesn't have a broadband office, is that what you're saying?
They have a broadband office, but the state of Ohio has definition that excludes municipal broadbands from it getting any funding through the state of Ohio. But under middle mile, it talks about local government. Most of them have Ohio or have state oversight. The middle mile funding is very specific, goes all the way down to local. So if your state does not want to give to local, can you still go after the NTIA
Yeah, that's
funding?
interesting question.
It's an interesting question. I think what you're saying, there's a couple of different pieces. So this is in the middle mile program. And for those,
Correct.
the middle mile program, just to review the bidding, is it's a smaller program. It's about $1 billion. It's a competitive grant program. So this does not go through state broadband offices, right? So unlike the state grant program, the big $42 billion program, we don't give money to the in that one we give money to the Colorado Broadband or whoever the governor designates, and the governor and the state will ultimately decide how that money is granted. In the middle mile program, it's a direct grant process. Right. And so, but you're raising a really interesting question. We call out that we're going to be accepting applications from a very wide variety of players, and we expect that, you know, to the extent that it's lawful, we will be hearing, and we expect to receive grant applications from those players.
Let me just build on that question, and before we go to our next question over here about what is the role of the staff that you both right. the historic staff that you've had and the staff right. now. Like obviously you've had many people work for many years on right. These programs before. You know, kind of the Broadband USA was the former entity, and now the Internet for All. What do you hope people will take from working with the staff at NTIA?
Well, first of all, I'll just say we're very lucky, and I've been so impressed. I've only been on the job a little over 4 months now, but one of the best things about my job is the team that we have, and that most of whom predated me, and many of whom have been part of the federal government for years at a time. They work very hard. This is like, you know, kind of for those of us who've been toiling in this space, probably a lot of you out there, this is a very unusual moment. I will say we've been really lucky again to have great staff. I hope that people will engage with them. There's a lot of expertise. I'll say we have 2 staffers here in the room or who'll be here at the conference who I just call out. One is Scott Woods, who's been the head of our first director of our Office of Minority Broadband Initiatives, and he is, am I allowed to say? I think I am.
You are.
He's going to be leaving us, unfortunately, but he's been a giant in the field, helped stand up this office, not going too far in the space, but Scott's here, and if you see him, he's a great person to talk to about a lot of this work, a lot of our digital equity, all of this work he's been a big part of. Sarah Blue is also going to be speaking here later today, and she's going to be the manager of our middle mile program. For specific questions on middle mile, I'd hit her up. I'm also joined by Sarah Morris, who's my senior advisor at NTIA on broadband issues. So all of us are here, and the idea is we're here to be a resource. You know, and we know we may not have gotten everything right in the beginning. We know there's actually a lot of more work to do here, so we really welcome your feedback.
Well, and let's give a round of applause to the NTIA staff.
Yes. I will say this team has been working incredibly hard since the passage of this bill. I know 6 months sounds like a long time to stand up these programs, but I can tell you in federal government time, that is like light years, and the amount of work that went into putting these giant notices together in a really thoughtful way, doing the outreach, listening to all the feedback, almost 600 comments we got in the public record, just a huge amount of work. So this is a big milestone for us, and of course, like I say, it's just the starting gun too.
We still have a little more time. We got about 10 more minutes, so if you've got questions, go to the Q microphones. Let's turn to Gary Bolton of Fibre Broadband.
Hey, Alan. I'm Gary Bolton, CEO of Fibre Broadband Association. And first of all, thank you for your leadership. Your staff is amazing. Doug Kinkoff and the whole team has been really great. I also want to congratulate you on the NOFO was actually very masterful in the way that you mitigated a lot of redlining issues like with LEO satellites and things like that really were going to cause a lot of issues. So I thought that you were very instructive without being too over-prescriptive. I thought you had the right balance. So thank you for that. I just wanted to just make a clarification on something that Drew said earlier. As we represent the fiber industry, there was a comment about Buy America. The fiber industry, we have plenty of domestic supply of fiber. Matter of fact, we actually exported 34% of our supply last year. And so from a Buy America plan, there's no reason not to buy domestic fiber. The issue is more on the electronic side where you're putting a lot of parts together that are globally sourced. So I just wanted to make that clarification just so that you don't leave here thinking that someone needs to buy China from anybody other than a domestic supplier.
Well, thanks for the clarification. Let me ask the first part of what he said about satellite broadband. Have you heard much from people about your declarations that satellite broadband is not reliable and you're basically not going to give any funding of this $42 billion to satellite?
So, starting point, let me just, first of all, just say thank you for the question and the clarification. I think it's well, it's well understood, and this is exactly why we do need to look carefully, and we will be putting in place a waiver process that's very careful about where the real sticking points are. And we know that there are going to be some, and we've heard from the fiber industry directly about some of this. So we're going to be watching capacity, and we're going to be looking at this, and we're eager to hear about your pain points, I would just say to everybody in the room. So on this issue, I think that may be an overstatement. I don't think that there will be no money going to satellite. I believe, our expectation is that in some states, it will be an important part of the solution.
State by state. So
state by
back
state.
to laboratories of democracy, different states can do different. Some states will be much more fiber focused. Other states will have a fiber terrestrial mix.
Yes, and it goes back to this overarching value of making sure that we're doing this right, and we're doing this in a way that is resilient to future needs. And you heard, I think, again, I struck by Senator Bennett's comments earlier today about wanting to make sure that we're not wasting this money. I think all of us feel very strongly who've been building this program in the federal government. This is our shot. We will not be able to go back to Congress 5 years from now or 10 years from now and say, oops, we didn't really build it in a way that works anymore. We need more money to upgrade speeds or to, build a different kind of network now. This is an infrastructure project. It's designed to last for years. And, we do put our thumb on the scale on the most resilient, future-proof technologies that we can, knowing that they are still going to be this is the balance you talked about, that there has to be an escape valve for states, that for the really high-cost areas, we fully expect that there will be states who will have significant portions of other technologies.
Okay, no, thanks for that clarification. We have another question over here.
Aaron Deacon with KC Digital Drive. A general question about how you can navigate between potential conflicts between funding sources. With a specific example in Missouri, there was a $42 million NTIA Broadband Infrastructure Program grant that was awarded in March, which I think covers 12 counties, maybe 13,000 individuals. And the projects were selected there were a few in the boot heel that were 2-year turnaround time, commitment to serve every household in the geographic area, and I think they may have been fiber. And it turns out after these were awarded, they found out that there were RDOF awards from the FCC's program that were made that had a 6-year timeline. The proposals were cherry-picking some of the best customers in the area, and the technology wasn't as good. And so the state's kind of struggling with, and what I understand is they've been told, well, the FCC wins this battle, and so, does the community lose? You don't need to necessarily address that specific one, although would love suggestions, but I'm curious how you kind of navigate those tensions through this process.
Yeah, it's a terrific question. I think our starting point in our commitment and what we've been asked by Congress to make sure that we are using federal funds wisely and we're not duplicating where we're going. As you've indicated, and I do think this is kind of an edge case, but there are edge cases, and we're aware of them, where unbeknownst to different agencies, awards have some overlap. And what we've done then after the fact is to deconflict those overlaps. And sometimes that, isn't what the local community wants. Our grants actually move out faster than those RDOF grants, so we consider them to be better grants for somebody to get. But we have stuck by that principle that we're not going to allow for double funding, and so we're working very hard. It takes a lot of work to make sure we're doing that deconfliction. This is where better data, by the way, and better maps are going to help us a ton in the future. But even as we work towards that better future, we're deconflicting and making sure we don't do that.
I mean, you kind of referred to the RDOF long process of this was 2 years ago they were bid on, and they haven't been awarded money on the street yet. Did you just say that RDOF areas will not be eligible, or could you just clarify how those are going to get handled?
So I would just say it's complicated. And the only reason I say that is because there's lots of there's different levels of RDOF awards for those who geek out on this stuff.
Right.
And
we geek out on
you
this
do
stuff,
here,
but,
I know. But like for awards that are already granted, you know, that are fully granted, right? I guess and I'm not going to get the terminology right. There are awards that the FCC has still not finalized, right? And for those awards, we do think that, you know, other grant makers in the federal government ought to be able to make grants in those spaces. And then should be up to the FCC to decide to deconflict. But for where those funds are contractually obligated, and I'm not going to get these terms right, so forgive me, but those who hopefully know what I'm talking about. There are gradations where we are going to make sure we deconflict.
Okay, we're running tight, but I like to err on the side of getting questions in. So, about 8:40. Okay, well, great. Then let's do them. Still, please be brief, one at a time. Go ahead.
Hi, Jace Wilson from Measurement Lab. I also have a geeky question. Also, everyone else who uses this mic is taller than me.
Probably moves.
Yeah, on the topic of mapping, I mean, there's an ongoing conversation in the internet measurement community about maybe the potential overemphasis on speed and throughput, bandwidth. And I was wondering how NTIA was thinking about other metrics such as latency, buffer bloat, responsiveness, and was just curious if you could talk about that.
Great
so
question.
It is a great question, and we've tried to add some of that into our notice and our approach to this. There's a requirement around latency. Again, we heard about this from in the comments that we received, and so we've tried to address that. There are other areas we have some looser metrics and desires around reliability and resiliency. And I think there's an opportunity to continue that conversation. So I just say we welcome more input on this. And I'm going to go quicker here because I know we have.
Well, but again, yeah. our balance is between getting the right answer versus getting all of the questions in. Is the 100 by 20 and 25 by 3, are those actual speeds or like promised speeds? Could you address that question?
Yes.
Yes.
They're designed to be actual speeds, but the question of like what does that mean is an interesting question, and one I think that we need to continue to dig into as we know.
And we certainly will. Okay, 2 more here. Go ahead.
Thanks, Drew. My name is Lori Adams. I'm the Senior Director of Broadband Policy and Funding Strategy for Nokia. Sticking with the mapping issue for a moment, could you talk a little bit about what you're anticipating the coordination between NTIA and FCC will be on the mapping data? Because obviously the fabric that the FCC is working on is going to be the single point of truth for all of these things. The NOFO asked the states to develop their own location-specific maps. And so could you just talk for a moment about what that is going to look like in terms of the states being able to provide that information in a timely fashion to the FCC for inclusion in the data maps?
So I think you're 100% correct. I mean, the FCC maps really need to be, we are mandated by law to use those maps and to make them the source of truth here. There is a process that the FCC has, and it's complicated, and it's part of what is tricky about the timelines, right? Which is that the FCC is collecting data this summer, and they'll be putting out that data in the fall, and they'll be opening it up for input and challenge from states. And so we're eager, and I will just say we are working directly and very closely with the FCC now on this issue. Our staffs are in touch regularly. I mean, we have a joint team of folks who are working on this. We talk a lot about it within the administration because we know it's a gating item. I'll just say I think the FCC chairwoman has indicated she's incredibly committed to putting resources into making sure that this happens fast. And I think your question just sort of, kind of raises the point about how important it's going to be to get these maps right. They're essential. We've made this error before, right? Which is to rely on maps like that are at the census block level or just not granular enough. These maps will be much better. It will take time to get them to be to that much better place. They'll always be kind of a approaching truth. Right. It's like asymptotically getting closer to the true state of what's happening out there. The best thing I would just say to everybody who's listening is, for those of you who are providers or people who have to put data into this system, we're really asking everybody to get their data into the FCC as quickly as possible, asking all providers, because that is going to be essential The faster they get the data, the faster they can clean it up, turn it around, and make sure that we've got good maps for everybody to use.
All right, penultimate question, then I have the final one, so go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. My name's Colleen McCroskey. I'm a telecommunications attorney in Denver at a firm called Kissinger & Fellman, general counsel for the Colorado Communications and Utility Alliance. I know we've talked a little bit about preemption, and I was very heartened to see that the NOFO strongly encourages the waiver of state laws that would preempt municipal governments from the provision of broadband services. I was wondering if the NTIA and its staff has considered what it would do if it gets a proposal from a state that is not willing to waive those state laws. Because on one hand, we have a very clear statement from Congress that states may not exclude local government from these fundings, but on the other hand, it seems like it may not be within the intent of this bill to exclude a state from funding. So I'm wondering if the NTIA has considered what would happen in that situation.
I think you've raised the issue well, which is just say we have these interests, which are very important. We strongly believe that there should be the widest possible variety of opportunity to participate in the program. We know that municipal broadband plays an important role, particularly in a lot of unserved areas. I think the answer is in our notice, which is you see in there us leaning in as far as we can, leaning in hard on the idea that states really should let those that variety of providers participate.
So Alan, it was one of your predecessors, Larry Irvine, who coined the term the digital divide. And the digital divide has come to mean lots of different things. In some cases, it's a kind of a Rorschach test for what problems we have with broadband. It can mean, the lack of broadband availability in rural areas. It can mean the high cost of broadband that keeps people in inner cities and other communities from having access. It could mean schools that don't have broadband, people who bring their laptops to McDonald's and other places because they don't have it. What are your thoughts, particularly as you've put a marker out there, a very strong marker? We want to end the digital divide. What will that look like? What does the digital divide mean from a programmatic, let's get rid of it type of
Right.
play?
Well, I'll just say, I think we have this goal that I think, and it was one of my predecessors who really popularized the term about the digital divide, of making sure that there's meaningful adoption and use, that people can participate, that everybody has the opportunity to participate in the modern economy. And we know that that means, more than just making sure there's a connection available, right? A connection into somebody's home, a wire running past, or a wireless connection. If it's not affordable, that doesn't do that person, that family, much good. If the connection's affordable, but they don't have a device to get online, that doesn't help. If they have a device to get online, but they don't know what to do, there are no applications, it doesn't work, there's nothing in the language that they speak, they don't understand, they don't have the basic skills, then we haven't met our goal. So we are looking holistically at all of these, and the beauty of what Congress, I think, did in this infrastructure bill and in the other programs they've passed is given us and others around the federal government tools to address this together. We've been talking about a bunch of different programs that NTIA is administering. This big state grant program, our digital equity program, our middle mile program. We have a really big tribal opportunity program. We think about braiding these programs together. And the notion is that they reinforce each other and they reinforce the programs like the Affordable Connectivity Program that the FCC is running, the Treasury money that's being out there, the Rural Development Fund, the agriculture programs. We are together, and I sit all the time with the other leaders in these programs at other parts of the federal government, and we talk about how to braid these programs together towards that long-term goal, that big picture goal of making sure that there's meaningful adoption. So we are working on the ground to pull these pieces together. As I said, our strong belief is that we're going to look back 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and look at this as the moment that our generation took the step to do what generations before us did, which is to make sure that everybody had the economic opportunity that they needed, that we addressed the inequalities and the fairness in our society by making sure that everybody could be part of the modern economy. And for us, that means meaningful adoption of high-speed, affordable, reliable internet. We are going to need your help. Really, the only way this works is if everybody, and it's not just the federal government, it's not just the state government, it's local communities, it's providers, it's the workforce that needs to be developed. It's people themselves getting online and being part of this and telling their neighbors about it. So I just say thank you. Thank you for being part of this movement. Thank you all for being part of this for many years, and thank you for having me here today. This is a big historic moment for our country, and we've got a lot of work to do together.
Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking Alan Davidson.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.